Now, the failed US presidential candidate Nikki Haley has sparked outrage on a visit to Israel by writing "finish them" on the side of an Israeli artillery shell.
Yes, the former governor of South Carolina has been a fierce supporter of Israel since their war with Hamas broke out following the October the 7th attacks. Ms. Haley said in a press conference on Monday that Israelis were doing the right thing.
Well, the actions and comments come after the Israeli president said an airstrike which killed civilians in Rafah was a tragic mistake.
Well, joining us now from Washington is US political analyst Eric Ham. Good to see you this morning, Eric. Tell us about this then, because it is, well, causing huge amounts of criticism across the world.
Well, yeah, it is. And one of the reasons for that is because we're continuing to see the ongoing large number of deaths continuing to play out, particularly in Rafah. But what we have seen from former Governor Nikki Haley is actually not unusual. In fact, during and going through her campaign and on the debate stage, she made clear that she was extremely hawkish when it came to Israel and also how she felt about the Middle East. And so this is not surprising at all from her. And in fact, this is actually par for the course for the Republican Party, given that they believe that the United States should actually be doing more, not less, in terms of providing weaponry and other military aid to Israel.
It's definitely hawkish. However, writing on artillery, and we know much of this artillery has killed and injured civilians, whether intentionally, accidentally, or just as collateral damage. Is it not that nuanced in the States? Because certainly over here, people your average voter just wouldn't buy that.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think what we have seen from a number of particularly hawkish conservatives is there is no distinction from Palestinians and Hamas. They tend to, I think, put them all in the same bucket. And I think that's what we have continued to see play out from a number of Republicans and conservatives in the United States. And I think what we're seeing from Nikki Haley is actually a continuing of the doubling down on this sentiment.
And she was doubling down, wasn't she? Because it's not just about the shell signing activities that we can see on the screen now, but talking to reporters later, she was unapologetic, wasn't she? She continued to criticise Joe Biden's administration.
Well, yeah, and also, too, some of this is a little bit of political theater. We know that for quite some time she had been at odds with the presumptive GOP nominee, Donald Trump. And now we know Donald Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, have a very close bond and connection. And so I think some of this is what we're seeing is Nikki Haley attempting to try to get back into those good graces of the ex-president as he continues his run toward the White House again.
Really? I mean, that's something which astounds me with US politics, in that these people go for each other in the most vicious of ways, and yet then whoever climbs out on top, everyone else is running after them with a begging bowl.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, in the United States, a lot of our politics is not only fueled by money, but it's also fueled by the theater and who can play the game well enough. And we know. And it was only a matter of time before Nikki Haley would eventually fall back in line. And that's what we're seeing play out right now, even as we continue to see the growing isolation of Netanyahu's government by the rest of the world and even by many here in Washington as well.
Eric, whilst we've got you, did want to ask you about the Trump trial that you've been covering for us throughout the whole time. The jurors are now deliberating on it. How do you think the trial went? And what will happen if Trump is found guilty?
Well, the trial certainly went without the fireworks many of us expected that we would see. It was pretty surprising that, of course, all of the jurors made it through this 4-week trial. And now we know that they're deliberating. Of course, they've asked for some readbacks on testimony from 2 prosecution key witnesses, David Pecker, as well as Michael Cohen. Some suggest that that's perhaps a good sign for the prosecution, but we're now watching and waiting. And now this is like a game of Russian roulette, because we're talking about 34 criminal charges against Donald Trump. And there could be the possibility where the jurors could find guilty on some charges, not guilty, and acquit on others. And I think if there's at least one guilty charge, I think that will be very difficult for Donald Trump politically. We're already seeing the ex-president struggle with building a national campaign with the infrastructure on the ground to compete nationally across the country. And I think if there is an actual guilty verdict in this case, I think that would be even more debilitating for not only Donald Trump, but for his party as they try to take back control of Washington.
OK. Eric, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much indeed.